So how do you know? How do you know if something's been doctored?
I had a ton of people calling this video fake, so here's a DI of it.
His top string is ringing out, but in the audio you can hear that the top string actually gets muted.
By being dishonest, you convince an entire generation of young musicians to compare themselves to the falsehood that you wear like a badge of pride, comparing themselves to an unrealistic standard that they will always fall short of. Always. Hi, I have a confession. For the last 2 weeks, I've been lying to you. For science, I promise. Please don't hate me. So you may have seen my video on what I call the Instagram guitarist phenomenon. It's made a kind of resurgence this month, presumably because of this video, where record producer Jacob Hansen reveals how a lot of these super technical Instagram videos are actually fake.
Notice right here, his top string is ringing out while he's going to tap. But in the audio, you can hear that the top string actually gets muted and all you hear is the tapping. Gotcha.
Now, my video from over a year ago was not about how the playing was potentially not real. Honestly, that's not something I really even considered. Like, I knew that it was possible to fake some of this stuff in the way that I'm about to show you, but I only thought there might be like 1 or 2 guys out there who were actually doing it, and that when they were doing it, it was really obvious. Turns out maybe that's not the case. At the time, I was more interested in examining how social media drives the genre, its consequences, and of course, the culture that surrounds it. My takeaway was that this is something like musical athletics. Obviously, these guys are phenomenal players, and they're truly pushing the envelope on what's possible on the instrument. And that in itself could be pretty valuable. Am I gonna listen to this? For a couple minutes straight? Probably not, if I'm being honest, but I can appreciate it for the short 30-second clip that it is. And you know what? Who knows? Maybe these guitarists are laying the groundwork for a shift in the Overton window of what is aesthetically permissible for guitar in popular music going forward. Perhaps there's a less dramatic version of this that can reinvigorate guitar in popular music. With hindsight, musical innovation can be pretty neat. I mean, trust me, I am no Van Halen fan, but maybe tapping wouldn't be as mainstream today if, you know, he never existed. But everything said in that video was said under the assumption that the playing wasn't completely fake, an assumption that we may need to reevaluate. Which brings me to my lie. 2 weeks ago, I posted this video about microfrets. I made the argument that adding these little fretlets or tastinos to your guitar can be an easy and cost-effective way of getting into microtonality. This part is totally true, and to demonstrate its utility, I did what I always do. End the video with a little riff that demonstrates the concept. Except, what I didn't mention is that part of the performance is totally fake. I lied, and I did it to prove a point. Jacob's video is great. He does a fantastic job of pulling back the curtain and showing us the ugly truth that is apparently all too real for some online guitarists out there. But I actually don't think that he went far enough.
I actually didn't record the video at full speed. I recorded it at 85% speed so that I could speed the video up in post to 125% to actually match the full speed of the song.
To me, this video is just a little too, how do you say, maybe obvious? You can hear it in the artifacting of his playing, and you can tell that his demonstration was sped up, all before he even explains that fact. To the extent that fake playing on Instagram or YouTube or TikTok exists, and be assured that it does exist, I truly don't think that it exists in large quantities as sped up clips. Because honestly, speeding up video is just, it's very noticeable, and I think the problem is more subtle and therefore more sinister than that. Even though that I am directly telling you right now that the clip you're about to see is totally fake, I don't think that the majority of listeners, myself included, could accurately and repeatedly in trial study testing identify exactly where or how it was faked. Try it out for yourself. Take a careful listen. So unless you consider adding effects like reverbs and delays or layering in some low impact kick drums to be faking it, there's exactly 3 points in this video that are doctored. It starts with this kind of offbeat thing. And essentially what I wanted to do is add an extra pop in between each note and slap. So what I did is recorded a single in isolation, spliced it in there, and then faded the ends to make it more natural sounding. That's subtle, and the way my hand is placed with this camera angle obfuscates the fact that I did not and could not play these ghost notes. I don't know, maybe if I had more time with it, I could probably get this underneath my fingers in a more organic way, but this next falsehood is literally impossible for me to do. Right before I transition into this slow Macam Bayati section, I do this kind of arpeggiated harmonic McFlurry thing. And here is closer to what I actually did. And then in post, I connected them all together like this and quantized. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if you were suspicious of this part in particular, because I had to do some quick camera cuts to hide my lack of ability to play 2 different harmonics on the same string at once. Maybe we should be more suspicious of quick camera cuts. Finally, we come to our last deception. Where is it, you may be wondering? Could it be in these super fast triplets? Surprisingly enough, no. That kind of thing is actually fairly easy to pull off. Or should I say, hammer on. But you know what is really difficult to do? Harmonics. I ended the jam by doing something like... And that's honestly really hard to get right, evidenced by the fact that when I recorded it, I didn't get it right. I flubbed it. Take a listen to the actual recording. To fix this, I recorded each of these harmonics individually, overlaid it onto my screw-up in post so that, the video would still line up, and finally cut out the original audio. If you were really astute, you probably noticed that there was no string scrape sound where there should have been. That's mostly due to sheer laziness. If I was being really serious about this and I wanted to get it right, I could have recorded a string scrape sound afterward and then matched it up with the video. Imagine some kind of weird dystopian guitar hellscape where the future's most famous and greatest guitarists are actually just really good Foley artists who Frankenstein only the most pristine and manufactured guitar parts with the sole purpose of matching them to a plausible video as evidence of their supposed virtuosity. Although I suppose that this kind of already exists in the world of high-end magazine airbrush artists, where it's not uncommon to remove your model's pores only to reintroduce industry-approved pores back into the final photo. To give the illusion of real, natural, unfettered beauty. Now, how many people are out there actually doing this kind of thing? And I'm not talking about your run-of-the-mill editing that everyone does. I'm talking about like this extreme type of editing that you then go and lie about and say it's not edited. Well, honestly, I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that it's not many, but it's definitely not none either. And while there are certainly some telltale signs of editing, like Jacob points out in his video, where you see people whose strings are ringing out in video, but then the sound is of them muted, a lot of red flags that you'd think to look for can actually be a little bit misleading. One way to check for editing is to see how well a waveform of a clip aligns to a grid. If each and every transient syncs up perfectly with each line segment, you can be reasonably sure that the audio has been quantized. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't quantize your music. Of course, that's a personal choice. I'm just saying that it is a sign of editing. But here's where it can get kind of devious. If we look at the waveform of what I played in that doctored clip, it'll be mostly on, because while it was tracked with a clip, the performance is still mostly organic. The waveform ebbs and flows as you'd expect it to from a real, non-edited performance, but as we all know, despite this being a rugged, non-quantized, off-grid recording, it's still highly edited, and this, in concert with the video, gives the definite impression that I can do something that I definitely can't do. Your average producer, by the way, can absolutely edit to this high level of detail if they wanted to, inserting intentional imperfections into a performance which would fool even the most astute of observers. By the way, I'm not saying that anyone's doing this specifically. I'm just trying to point out how dark the road can get. As of the recording of this video, Microtonal Frets Change Everything has garnered an embarrassing 7,000 views. I also posted clips of the riff on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately to the psyche of my beginner bassist viewers out there, this batch of clips, shorts, and reels collectively garnered about 100,000 views and around 350 comments. And do you know how many of those people question the authenticity of my playing? 0. Not one soul. I did, however, funny enough, get one comment about how impressive that doctored harmonic arpeggio was. Thank you, commenter Braylon9, for your sacrifice. Wait a minute, but Braylon? Bro, is this your burner account?
Where has the time?
Yeah, I probably eroded some of my audience's goodwill and trust by doing this, but I think it's important because it proves a point. This stuff can be really hard to detect. So how do you know? How do you know if something's been doctored? Okay, so this know-it-all 42069 is accusing me of faking my bass playing. So we're gonna prove him wrong. We've got no effects, no processing, just the raw camera audio and my unfiltered skill. Did that sound convincing? Well, I hope by this point in the video your answer is no, because newsflash, that was the most fake one yet. Here's what I did. I recorded everything with my camera audio, just like I said. But you didn't actually see me do it live. You saw me saying all that stuff in the beginning, and then miming a version of that riff that I recorded, this time piece by piece, taking the best sections of each and comping it together at a micro level to get the most absolute perfect version of this riff that I could get.
I had a ton of people calling this video fake, so here's a DI of it, but I'm gonna play you the riff first.
Yeah, I'm just not buying it. To me, there's a bit of a difference between faking and editing. I like to think of it like there's a spectrum of permissibility. What can and can't you get away with when it comes to your instrument, videoing yourself playing that instrument, and studio recordings? This, of course, is going to look different for different people. We, at the end of the day, all have our own line and have our own criteria of when that line is crossed. For example, in 1906, legendary military musician John Philip Sousa wrote an essay voicing his concerns over the phonograph. He called it the menace of mechanical music. You see, Sousa was decidedly against musical recordings themselves, musing that, quote, "The Nightingale song is delightful because the nightingale herself gives it forth. The boy with a penny whistle and a glass of water may give an excellent impression, but let him persist, and he is sent to bed as a nuisance." Sousa foresaw what he called a marked deterioration of American music and taste because of the invention of sound recordings. To really hammer it in, he ended that essay by saying, quote, "It is at the fireside that we look for virtue and patriotism, for songs that stir the blood and fire the zeal, for songs of home, of mother, of love that touch the heart and brighten the eye. Music teaches all that is beautiful in the world. Let us not hamper it with a machine that tells the same story day by day, without variation, without soul, barren of the joy and of the passion." What I'm trying to get at is that Mr. Sousa is at the bottom of the permissibility spectrum. He thought that recording music was fake. If there are levels of abstraction here, and recording your music is, say, one level of abstraction away from reality, John Philip Sousa demanded 0 levels of abstraction. Most of us today, I would hope, would say that this is kind of crazy, right? But you know what? We all have our line somewhere. Where's yours? I'll often play with 2, sometimes 3 compressors in my chain when I'm playing bass. It makes techniques like tapping just 100 times easier. I venture to say that most reasonable people would say, yeah, that's totally fine. It falls well within the permissible side of the spectrum. Yet, clearly, I'm being aided by a tool that helps me sound better than I otherwise could. Sometimes, if the song calls for it or we only have X amount of time, I might choose to quantize something. Maybe we want a really straight feel to the drums or for the bass to sit a certain way in the groove. Maybe I missed the one by a hair, so we need to nudge it over a little bit just to make things feel right. Well, now, potentially, we're getting closer to impermissibility, but again, I still think that most people would say that we're generally all right here. Personally, I consider myself to be a sound designer first and a bassist second. The way I choose to express myself through my instrument is more so in the timbre and in the texture and the effects, rather than, how many notes I can shove into a single bar or how well I can phrase a line. Here's a before and after of one of my Instagram jams. Is laying on the effects that thick misleading? Maybe. I mean, this commenter seems to think so. It certainly sounds way different with effects than it does with only the minimal processing, but to me, it's totally okay and permissible because as a sound designer, the effects are kind of the whole point, and I'm very upfront about that. And because of that, funny enough, I paradoxically consider the final product with all the effects and stuff to be more authentic to myself rather than the first video. But you know what? Others are going to see it differently. I'm sure to many of you watching, this crosses the line. Occasionally when we're tracking in the studio, I might have to punch in a section that I flubbed in an otherwise decent take. Again, I think that most people, particularly musicians who record in studios a lot, will think this is pretty par for the course. But what if you have to punch in more than just occasionally? What if it's every single note?
So do you see all of those lines? Those are all
separate
cuts.
audio files that have been put into one take. We got up to like 87 takes.
Wow.
different take, right? So this is all one take. And then
Different take.
different take,
Different take.
different take.
Really?
Yeah. And you would never know.
I can totally see how someone would look at that and then say, yeah, that's my line right there. It's just too much editing for me. And what of these highly technical Instagram musicians who covertly or sometimes overtly add extra notes to their playing? The Instagram guitarist who is so hell-bent on feeding the algo with the most insane, impossible guitar solo that they lose themselves in a desperate attempt to keep up with the sheer speed of their carefully curated riffage, miming track after track to prove to the world, or to themselves, that they are indeed the ultimate god of guitar. My guess? Most people would rightfully call bullshit. And they do. Just look at the comments. And I'd just like to take a second and say, I know that I, and Jacob before me, have given this guy a lot of shade, and honestly, I don't even necessarily mean to. The truth of the matter is that if we divorce the audio from the video, it sounds kind of cool. Honestly, I kind of dig it. I could totally see myself sampling parts of that for a song. Which brings me to my final point before I give some possible solutions to this fake Instagram guitarist crisis. In sound and in music, I think everything is permissible. To me, music is all about making just really cool sounds and then expressing yourself in different ways with those sounds. However you need to get there, whatever you need to do to make the sounds that you want to make, it's totally okay. With one giant caveat. You gotta be honest about it. Transparency is the only ethical path forward, particularly when you display your skills on video. Personally, I'm okay when someone mimes their playing. Obviously, I mime my playing all the time. I think everyone understands that pretty much everyone does this, and you aren't literally filming the exact take that you're hearing. And I'm okay with editing too. Honestly, like, again, it's if that's the sound you want to create, go for it. But when you make a dedicated video just to say, hey, look, I'm not faking my playing, I can do this, here's the camera audio, and then you go ahead and fake that, you are unequivocally crossing the line into the impermissible. You are lying to your audience, and the audience deserves better. Because guess what? A high percentage of your audience, because of your niche, are going to be musicians themselves. And all you're doing by being dishonest to them is discouraging beginner guitarists from pursuing what could be a very rewarding journey of learning music. By being dishonest, you convince an entire generation of young musicians to compare themselves to the falsehood that you wear like a badge of pride, comparing themselves to an unrealistic standard that they will always fall short of. Always. To bring it back to modeling and Photoshop, a reference which I'm sure my 90% male musician audience will be all too thrilled to hear about, American supermodel Cindy Crawford once famously said, "I wish I looked like Cindy Crawford." I wonder how many guitarists out there and on Instagram resonate with this. Wouldn't it be so much better to, I don't know, get thousands of views because you're a wicked, talented sound designer than to get hundreds of thousands of views because you rage baited your audience by pretending to be an inhuman mechanical riff machine? Which brings me to a possible solution for this crisis, or 3 possible solutions to this crisis. 1, please don't film yourself pretending to do the impossible. If you have to edit together some sort of insane riff because you don't actually have the skill to pull it off, that's fine. That's totally fine if you like how it sounds, but you probably shouldn't then film yourself pretending like you can do it, no problem. And definitely, and I mean definitely, don't, upon being called out for this, make a response video doubling down and faking it even worse. You're giving people a false impression, and you're probably discouraging a lot of people who are new to the instrument. Just admit it and move on. 2, film yourself, but put some sort of disclaimer on the video. Guitarist and YouTuber Ben Levin comes to mind for this one. He did this video a long time ago showing that you can actually do some pretty neat things when you speed up your playing. But Ben being Ben and being years ahead of the curve did the ethical thing and slapped a giant "this is sped up" label on the videos where he does that. 3. If you have to have a video because you're playing the social media game, make it real obvious that you're not actually playing. Look, I totally get it. As a musician who's also a content creator, it doesn't really matter how inventive or technically impressive your playing is. It honestly doesn't even matter how good or beautiful your songs are. If you don't play the social media game and have, a catchy video to go with it, you won't get traction and no one's gonna listen to your music. This, of course, is further complicated if music is how you make your living. So if you have to have a video that goes with your super impossible edited guitar playing, make it really obvious that you're not actually playing it, or include a window of your editing software. RJ Payson does a really good job of this, I think. He's someone who strikes me as someone who's also a sound designer first, who just happens to make sounds on a guitar. And it's obvious that everything he does is super edited. I think that's very intentional. He doesn't try and obfuscate or blur that line. He's super upfront about exactly what he does and how he does it. And I think this is great because it really gives us a license to enjoy the sounds for what they are. We're not caught up in, is he playing what he's actually playing or is he not? No, we're just listening to the sounds, which is where the focus should be. On that note, and in the interest of internet guitar ethics, I've deleted or privated all of the reels from the last 2 weeks that had this jam in it. And I've put a big disclaimer in the description, pinned comment, and in the screen caption on my microfrets video. I pledge going forward that if I reduce this kind of editing for whatever reason, that I'll slap a giant on-screen note saying that it was edited. I am not interested in showing people how much better at bass I am than them. I really just care about making cool sounds, and you should too. So let's make some crazy sounds, and let's be ethical about it. What do you think, Jordy? Should we ask the good people of YouTube to like and subscribe to the channel? Huge thank you to all of my patrons now on screen. These videos without you, frankly, just would not be possible. If you're new here, mostly we do music theory, musicology, and microtonality on this channel with, obviously a little bit of bass thrown in. So if you'd like to and are able to support the channel, the best way to do so is through Patreon. When you join the Microtonalist tier, you'll get a bunch of extra content like my lecture series on microtonality for the modern musician, as well as extended cuts and early viewings of my upcoming videos, bass lessons, and access to the Microtonalist Manual, a comprehensive resource containing everything that you'd ever want to know about making music in 31 Edo. Jordy awaits you with open arms and, of course, a whole lot of notes.